Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with Golden Opportunities Coaching. Welcome to those of you who are new. Welcome back to those of you who are seasoned veterans of what we do around here. Hope that things are going well for you. Hope that everything comes together well for you. Welcome to those of you who are new. What we do around here, we also try to give psychological, spiritual, and coaching advice to a variety of topics, and we do that as often as we can. Hopefully, schedule is going to get a little bit better, I hope, in the weeks to come here. In any event, we are going to talk today about emotional blackmail and the effects thereof. Emotional blackmail is one of those things that I deal a lot with my clients because a lot of times abusive relationships are built upon emotional blackmail. And so understanding the four signs, or the four most common signs, obviously there's more, everybody's different, but there's four common signs of emotional blackmail. And so if you understand those, you can control your interactions with people. You can alter how you interact with certain individuals and all sorts of other interesting and useful things. So the first one is to be controlled by fear. The basis of emotional blackmail is the so we'll define a term here called the faith or fear fulcrum. The idea behind this concept is you either have faith in a person or you have fear of the person. And when you're in a relationship, obviously you want to have faith that they are invested in you, that they care about you, that they're looking out for your best interest and you for them, that the relationship is growing in a positive direction. But and oftentimes we are emotionally compelled and subconsciously controlled by that faith, right? Like the investments we make in another person ultimately come down to, I believe this person has my best interest at heart, so I'm going to take care of them as though this is true. Well, wait a second. If the opposite is true and you're motivated by fear, if the opposite is true and you're compelled by fear, then you will be controlled by that fear. And so control by fear usually means something as simple as I am going to take an action because I'm afraid of the reaction that not taking this action will cause. So that's something like something as simple as my partner wants their coffee on the table at 6:15 every morning, and if I'm waking up at 6:20, I'm automatically panicked because I know there's a negative consequence. Or my partner doesn't want me to talk to other people, and so if my text message goes off, I am instantly overcome by fear because I know there's a negative consequence. The idea is action relates instantaneously, and when we say instantaneously, we're talking about a matter of seconds, 10, 15 seconds or less, is linked to fear. And so the beginning of control in that way usually is it starts off benign enough. It starts off simple enough. Hey, I really don't like it when this happens. Hey, I really don't like it when that happens. And so all of us, or most of us anyway, nobody ever, always, or nevers, but most of us, when we're in a new relationship, we take stock of those things that our new partner doesn't like, and we go, hey, I value this person. I don't want them to hurt. I want the relationship to continue. So I'll make this concession. And then link by link and leap by leap, there's this idea of, well, I've made this concession and this concession and this concession. And before I know it, all of my actions are determined by reacting to fear of the other person's reaction. And so, um, there's this idea that I'm not reacting from being happy. I'm not reacting from feeling supported. Actually, I'm reacting from the exact opposite. I'm reacting from my fear. I'm reacting from the avoidance of negative consequence. I'm reacting from everything that could go wrong instead of everything that could go right. So the second one is not being allowed to leave the relationship. So this is more subtle. Usually something like this goes, I don't know what I'll do without you, which sounds romantic, right? Like in the theory that we all desire on some level to feel significant to another person, and we desire to feel love and connection. Thank you, Abraham Maslow, for the knowledge there, the hierarchy of human needs. It's part of human desire to feel both significance and love and connection. And so When something sounds like love, hey, I don't want you to leave me, I'm scared. Hey, I don't want you to leave me, I couldn't imagine my life without you. When we hear that, the beginning of hearing that feels good because we've made such an impact on people's lives that, in fact, there's a negative consequence to if we were to leave a person's life. However, that's without force. Now, when that blends with force, which usually is like a negative consequence to you leaving, I will harm your pet, I will harm myself, I will harm you, I will harm your family, I will disparage you online, I will disparage you offline, I will cut everyone off from you. If there's a negative consequence related to not being allowed to leave the relationship, you are being emotionally blackmailed. And here's where, and when I coach people in these type of situations, you have to draw a hard line in the sand. If you have dealt with someone with a dark triad personality disorder, right? So we're talking borderline, we're talking narcissistic personality disorder, we're talking Machiavellian disorder. You cannot afford to care about the emotions of the other person because they don't care about yours. And for lots of people, that's a very hard concept, especially if you spent years or months or sometimes decades with a person. Imagine the image, the emotional image of not caring about how they respond to things anymore. Um, Ultimately, is wow, how can I ever do that? Aren't I cold? Aren't I harsh? Doesn't that make me a liar? Doesn't that invalidate the type of loving person I am? This especially happens to people with very strong either religious or spiritual backgrounds. They conflate the idea that what they believe in terms of what love is relates to standing for emotional blackmail and abuse, and that's nothing could be further from the truth. If you are constantly dealing with a person that makes you doubt yourself, run far, fast, and away. And honestly, if you are years later or months later still dealing with those issues emotionally of I feel guilty for having left, or I feel guilty for setting my boundaries, which we're going to get to in a second, I feel guilty for any number of things, you really do need to work with a trauma recovery specialist and someone who understands how to rewire the brain against these thought processes, because sooner or later what's going to happen, two things are going to happen. Number one, your mental health is going to be negatively affected. It's more likely that you'll go into depression. Depression can lead to substance abuse. It's more likely you're going to develop anxiety or panic. It's more likely you're going to develop social anxiety. All of these because a person has distorted your view of what love is and is not. Secondarily, the other thing that will happen is when you put yourself out there again romantically or even to develop friendships, you're more likely to attract into your life the same type of person because you haven't set a clear boundary of no, this type of behavior is not okay. I'm not going to allow someone to manipulate my emotions to the point where I stay longer than I should. And let's be clear, I've been studying the art of trauma recovery and self-development for 23 years. I started as a teenager, started even before I graduated high school. I've been professionally involved with it for 13 and did 3 years volunteer before that. So we're talking more than a decade and a half. And I still, and I share this so that you don't feel alone, I still fell victim to, nope, I still fell survivor. And I know fall survivor sounds weird, but I survived it and I'm a better person for it. But I fell survivor to this type of scenario and I had all this knowledge. So imagine you're a person who has none of this knowledge or very little of this knowledge, or you grew up in a family where emotional blackmail was common. It's so much more likely that you'd fall into these traps. Part of it is really forgiving yourself for falling into it, and then the other thing is having new thoughts and feelings and emotions and behaviors around what you will and will not tolerate. These things are essential, which leads into thing number 3 on our list, which is an emotional blackmailer will always break your boundaries. Now, they don't come out and say, I am breaking your boundary. Wouldn't that be easier, right? Wouldn't that be more simple if someone just said, I'm going to break your boundary now? And then you'd be like, no, you're not. And you'd be done. But generally, it's, again, a guilt laden or a reward laden idea. So, just this once, let me do X, Y, Z. Or if you loved me, you would ABC. There's always this fulcrum related shift in the energy and in the emotion of the relationship when a person's breaking your boundary. So if your boundary is, hey, I don't want to deal with drugs in my house, the boundary breaker might say, okay, well, you don't have to deal with it in the house, but can I do it in the driveway? And I've actually dealt with a client like this in the last 6 months, who literally, that was one of the challenges they were having in their marriage. Is like, she was like, okay, you can do it away from the house, but we have kids. I'm not going to let you do XYZ in the house. And he's like, okay, can I do it in the driveway? Can I do it in the shed? And it was like, no, not in the house means not on the property to me. And we had to go through that in a couples coaching session and figure out like how to honor that boundary. But it was very clear that honoring that boundary did not come naturally to the other party. And so, we all break other people's boundaries, sometimes without meaning to, sometimes because we ourselves are in a hurting place, or we're desperate to get what we want or whatever. And it happens from time to time. But when there's a deliberate consistency to the breaking of boundaries, there's also a deliberate disrespect between people. And that can be extremely dangerous. The last one that I want to talk about is no response to their own emotional feelings or shifting with emotions. So what does that mean? So an emotional blackmailer only cares about the bottom line. They do not even care about how they feel. Now, they can act emotionally, but on the inside, on their autopilot is, this is the way things are. This is the way things are going to be. You're not going to change me. I'm not going to change anything except how you feel and how you react and how you respond. And so you might see something like they break down crying, they apologize, and then 20 minutes later, they're back to doing an offensive or controlling behavior. This is because for an emotional blackmailer, even when they show emotion, even that can be used as a blackmail indicator. And the other thing, too, is they're not feeling their emotions except when they're winning or getting the goal that they want, whatever that goal is. Other than that, an emotional blackmailer is oftentimes, most times actually, extremely devoid of emotional connection. Now, this oftentimes, most times actually, overlaps with other types of personality challenges and disorders. But suffice to say, at the end of the day, they're not responding to their own emotions. They're only responding to getting what they want. And that success or failure determines their emotional core. So in any event, I encourage you to keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody, take care.